All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 23 of the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. Thank you guys for tuning in, whether you're on iTunes, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this, however you're listening to this. I really appreciate it. We've had a lot of great episodes last couple times. I can't believe we're up to episode 23 already. I've done this almost a year now, and I've been having so much fun with this podcast, and I appreciate every one of you guys for listening in. It's been a while since I've had somebody from my band, Vertebreaker, on. I think the last time I had a member was back in episode 15 with Rod. So it's been a while since I've had one of the guys in the band on. I've had a lot of great guests, in between Rod and Ryan and all that stuff. So I just want to kind of head down and talk to one of the other guys in the band. Finally feature this guy. He's I'll give you a little backstory on how Greg got involved with the band. Basically in, I want to say February, March of 2014, we had already recorded our first EP, produced by Brett Hessla, in Orlando. And it was at a time where we, without going into too much details, we felt like we kind of needed to make a change, and we were in between guitar players at the time. And I remember just, trying out a bunch of different guys, and I remember Rod coming up to me. He's like, "Hey, well, Jack, have you talked to my buddy Greg? I've known this guy for many years, and he's not really interested in like being in a full-time band or whatever, but he's a really good guitar player, and he's always he learns songs quickly. So even if we need somebody to fill in for a little bit for live dates, we could just, call on my buddy Greg, and I don't know how interested he'll be in doing it, but, we just bring him by." And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, yeah, why not? We're trying out a lot of different guys. I figure I'm like, all right, well, Rod knows this guy, so obviously there's a connection there. So, if Rod says he's cool, then he must be pretty cool. So, we finally bring Greg in, and obviously I could tell right off the bat that he was a great player. I could tell, he was able to learn our songs right away, and sometimes you could just tell the chemistry was there, and I felt it was certainly between Rod and Greg. They had known each other for a while. I had seen sort of the chemistry between Greg and Ryan, our other guitar player, and having the chemistry between the two guitar players for me was really important. Just because you never know how two different players are going to, mesh and gel together. And that was always a big thing. I've always been such a fan of that two guitar sound. So I could tell that right away. But, the interesting thing about it is when we brought Greg in, he was kind of at the place, I should say he was sort of at a place in his life where, he had a wife and kid at home, and, he wasn't, at least the way I understood it, he didn't really think that he was going to be the type of guy to be in a full-time original band again. It just seemed like it was one of those things where that wasn't really what he was looking for. At least I was told that wasn't something he was really seeking out as far as being a band member. And none of us had really expected that from him. We came in and be like, okay, well, this guy's going to come in and he's going to fill in with us for a little bit. But as time went on, it just seemed like the chemistry was there. It just kind of grew into well, we really want Greg to be in the band. And as it turns out, Greg wanted to be in the band. He liked our stuff enough. He believed in what we were doing. And ever since then, 2014, was when he started playing with us. And now 2 years later, he's still with the band, and he's a very big part of the band. Not just as a lead guitarist, but also in terms of running the website. He's a very organized guy, and I think he kind of helps keep us all on track. I always look at him like almost like a big brother in terms of he helps kind of rein us in if, some of our ideas get a little too off the rails. And I think we kind of but we also have some of our ideas sort of rub off on him, and it's a good sort of mixture. It's like Rod and I, for example, we love to really perform on stage. We really love to put on a show. And Greg is he's a musician's musician. He's very much about keeping the music solid. very much a no frills kind of guy. But I think, but I think out of that, we've kind of caused there to be sort of a blend, sort of like, keeping the music solid while putting on a visually exciting show. And I think Greg has really come a long way in terms of on-stage performing. Not that he was ever bad at it, but it's just, he was more focused on keeping the music solid. And that's really what we need. And I can't tell you how important this guy is to the band. And we've written a lot of good stuff with him since then, since he's joined in the band. And he's just one of those guys I relate to, not only as a musician, but just as a person, as a guy. He's just a great guy. And so I've wanted to get him on the podcast for a while, and now I'm excited to welcome to the Phoenix Report, Greg Summers.
Jack, good to be on here, of course. And thanks for that nice introduction.
Definitely, man. Well, I mean, I meant every word of it. It's just, it's kind of cool knowing how you came into the band, and it's one of those things where it wasn't really expected, but out of that, we ended up forming this bond and this connection, and you're still in the band to this day, and you've really like kind of taken on sort of a leadership role in the band. And I think it's great how, I mean, obviously it's hard to be like objective when you're talking about your own band, but I really like how cohesive that the five of us are.
In the beginning, I think obviously there was touch and go things in my, the way I kind of, I mean, you hit it. You're exactly right. I mean, that's basically how I was in the beginning, because I hadn't played in a band in quite some time. And a lot of it was, there was a lot of things going on, some health related of just, getting old, things starting to not work as well as they used to. And so for a while there, it was painful for me to actually even play guitar.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, I've for several years have fought with, some stuff. You're just trying to get my health back in order. And it was kind of an opportunity for me to really push myself out there and focus on kind of doing what I love, because it pushed me into putting some money into my equipment. I'm kind of a gearhead. I love, well, I don't like spending money on it, but it's a necessary evil. So, I've put in quite a bit of money since this into my setup, and trying to get that. Like you said, I am when it comes to the about the music, it's real important that we're very solid, and that is first and foremost, which makes me that musician. But I also understand the entertainment aspect of it. So I think we're all trying to. And I mentioned, touch and go. I mean, we obviously don't go in detail, but that chemistry is important. And when there's, elements in the band that aren't, that kind of disrupt that chemistry, it can be really tough. And we've gone through some changes, and I think that now we have a solid lineup. And if there's problems, we feel like we can talk to them, and then people are receptive to anything that we have to say, because everybody's different. We all have different personalities.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your point, we don't have to go into too much detail about this, but yeah, there were some people in the band at the time when you joined who were kind of disrupting that chemistry, but, changes had been made since then. And I mean, to be honest, we've really had a pretty solid lineup for almost 2 years now of like the same five guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, I refer to that to when Jarrett joined the band on drums, and so I mean since then, just the chemistry has just been off the charts, I think.
And that's it's seldom does that happen. I think that me personally, everybody in the band knows that I'm very focused on my career and not personally ready for the musician fame. And actually, take that back. I like to be famous, but at the same time, the fame is cool, but you just don't have it much anymore. And I say fame, I really mean just getting out there, actually making a living. I shouldn't say fame is a wrong word, but making a career, making a living out of playing music. And that's very hard to do. Everybody knows that the industry has changed, and when you quote unquote make it, and that was that word we always used when I was, in my teens and high school.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make it. I want to make it. But, it's one of those things I tried to get across to some of the former members is saying, look, when you get there, it's not the same. And of course, no matter how much people say, oh, I know it's not the same, it really is very tough. Even when you're out there you got to have some great representation. And you got to, it's hard late in the game for all of us to eat crow for as long as you'd have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad because, ultimately my passion is music, outside of, tech stuff. I'm a tech buff. That's all I do. That's my day job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely a passion for me too. And I bring that into music as much as I can, but, it's hard anymore. And it's really sad that we can't, actually have something that we could take and, but it's hard. I'm into my 40s and been married for 20 years. You're talking, my wife doesn't really, don't ever show your wife the movie Rockstar. That was,
well, I mean, I could definitely say a lot for that because one of the ways that you and I relate to each other, for one thing, we're the only two married guys in the band. But also it's like, and I've met your wife once or twice, but I mean, I know that she and my wife are very similar in that they're not necessarily used to this crazy world that we occasionally dip our feet into. And they're pretty conservative girls, and not like talking like politics, but just in terms of personality, they're not all about the party rock star kind of thing, and neither
are we.
And we're not really those guys. Like, we're in this kind of a similar situation where it's like we have our day jobs, we have our careers and everything, but we still love to do this. And getting to your point earlier, not to backtrack, but I think people have a lot of misconceptions when they look at a band like ours and say like, oh, well, they're a really good band, but those guys are weekend warriors. They're just kind of doing it for fun. And not that anyone's really said this to me, but it's something that I want to address. And just because we do this on the weekends or because we don't invest 100% of our time into this, that doesn't mean we want it any less. And by that, I mean that we're like anybody else. We have dreams. We have desires. Of course we want to make it. We want to take this as far as we can possibly go with it. At the same time, it's not a bad thing to be realistic and to be, aware of the difficulties and to have a backup plan and also to have other things going on in your life. I don't think that's a bad thing. On the other hand, if you're able to balance all these things and still give it, a great effort and still make good music, then you're doing it right. I mean, that's not to get off on a rant, but that's my feeling about it, and I'm pretty sure that you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think that it's not that I'm trying to say all the sad part, but the frustrating part for anybody is that, like, some people, hey, that's their idea. They want to go out, they want to tour constantly, they want to go out and play in front of thousands of people, and it sounds great. I think it's really great when you're doing it, like night to night, maybe like when you're actually playing in front of them. But the rest of the time is not easy.
Right. And look, I'm not begrudging anyone who is out there, really hustling, trying to make it and trying to do this full time as a touring musician. I know there are a lot of guys out there who are struggling right now. I mean, if that's what you want to do, God bless, man. Good on you.
Well, and I think I've learned, just from growing is basically, obviously having this backup plan, and then, but I think is having those plans where you can say, look, we got to treat this. A lot of times you got to treat it like a business.
Mm-hmm.
You got to look at it and just say, no, we're not. We're kind of past the party, the 80s style kind of band stuff that would be, that everybody thinks about, that my wife or your wife may think about. And I look at it as like anything. Okay, how can we make this a project or whatever you want to call it, a small business to where we can actually bring in some sort of revenue, where we can have, have a good time, but yet make even if it's like, because you never know. Usually things happen, I think, when you least expect it. And then, of course, you got to make that decision is, what do we do here? In my industry, things move very quickly, and tech related stuff. It's, for me to just drop everything and then hope that it would be there when I came back is a very tough call. So, somewhat frustrating when I think about what if something were to come of it. I'd be faced with this decision, and it's something that I thought about constantly when I was a kid. I had brochures of the Musicians Institute in Hollywood, Berklee School of Music in Boston. I was looking at all these schools and ways to get out. I was going to, we're going to move to LA. We're going to do all this kind of thing.
Right.
And so that's all I thought about. And then when I met Rod, I was probably 23 maybe. So that was 1995, 96. So I was 22, 23. And they had a band called GHN, or Giant Hairy Nevis.
Yes, we've talked about Giant Hairy Nevis on Rod's episode.
Exactly. So they had this band, and for me, growing up, and I grew up in a small town. I say grew up in high school. That's where I spent my high school years in Northwest Florida, and it was a very, I say back. It's not so much anymore, but it was. I called it a redneck town at the time, but there's far worse now. But they've grown a little bit. But most of the people were, country folk, and there wasn't much of that scene around. I played bass at the time. I actually started out on bass guitar. Mm-hmm. And I played guitar, as well. But I was known as a bass player.
Did you play bass first before guitar?
Probably more seriously, yeah. I mean, I played guitar. I would play guitar, kind of on the side. My brother had an acoustic guitar, and I picked it up. And my family was a very religious family, so I'd push the envelope. So Stryper was my pushing the envelope. So
right.
I was a big Petra and Stryper fan, and even as soft as like Michael W. Smith. I mean, we were, my roots are in that. Christian music,
Right. You not to interrupt you. I mean, you had mentioned to us, a few times, that growing up, I think, your parents were a little bit religious, and maybe that they weren't too down with a lot of the hard rock / heavy metal music because they were kind of afraid there might be some bad influences in there, which understandable, especially at that time. People were paranoid about that. How did that sort of affect early on, as a kid getting into this kind of music and eventually wanting to be a musician?
I think that it made a pretty big impact, actually, because I had a lot of friends. I was in private school up until 8th grade because the school actually didn't have enough kids. So they shipped us off to Madison Middle School, which is in Titusville. And so that was I started to hang out with different people and got into some different music because of that. But I don't think I was exposed to as much as I could have, or I was exposed to it, but I couldn't listen to it. So I had to hide, actually. I had to, constantly, sneak into my room, and I had records that were either hidden behind like better one, like Stryper or something like that. But I genuinely was into those guys, so I could freely listen to that. They didn't like it. They didn't like the long hair. I remember I put up a poster in my room one time, and my stepmom came in and she said, "If you don't take that down, I'm going to rip it down." I remember those words. It was right above my bed, but they looked like full-on girls. I get it, But see,
this is a Stryper poster?
Oh yeah, my parent was "To Hell with the Devil" was the album that came out in '87, I think it was.
Right, which is, I mean, when you think about it, it's as clean cut as it gets.
I know, and so you look at that, and I'm like, I've even joked, in the past, 10 years, I'm like, come on, guys, are you serious? Because I have a younger sister, she's 8 years younger than me. I mean, she's been married for quite a while, and she's on her own, but she was listening to Green Day, and I'm like, seriously, guys, she's listening to Green Day. I couldn't even listen to Stryper, and they were Christian, so. But my parents were divorced, and my mom lived up in Jacksonville, and my brother was 6 years. One of my brothers was 6 years older than me. A big, huge Motley Crue fan. So I mean, so much he used to wear the eyeliner underneath his, like the football players were. So he was a big Nicky Six.
Right. I'm sure that didn't go over too well at home.
Well, they knew all that. I remember he brought a tape of Shout of the Devil over, and of course he had that. I remember I was sitting on our fireplace and I was looking at this. So 85, 80, something like that. You know, I think it came out in 84, but seeing this, my dad was just beside himself, freaked out, you know. And I remember seeing Vince Neil, and, you know, that picture of Vince Neil with his leather pants and his, like, suspenders, but he doesn't have a shirt on, you know.
Right.
You know, looking at that, I was like, dude, that's like a hot chick right there. But it was Vince Neil. But, yeah, my dad was not a fan. And my brother, Tony, always pushed the envelope. He still does to this day. And so when I'd come back, he would give me stuff. I had, you know, Rat, I had Dokken. So he got me into all these things. I think he gave me a Dokken record because he didn't want it. So I think, you know, he wasn't really into them. And that became my second. I was a huge Dokken fan through high school. And so eventually I moved in up with my mom in high school. And so that opened up where I could basically do anything that I wanted because that's how Mom was, you know. So Mom encouraged every type of music. She loved to listen to me play, and that's something I didn't get at home. I didn't come from a musical family,
right?
And so aside from my grandfather, who played a little acoustic guitar, but you know that growing up, being in high school at my mom's, that was probably the most influential time. But my point, which I got off on a tangent, but my point was, I wasn't exposed to or allowed to listen to a lot of things, so I might have missed things. I had friends that were into Iron Maiden. I remember this, and I was like, Iron Maiden, that's that Eddie character, right? Oh my gosh, they look so like evil, right? And
right.
I was like, I could never listen to that. But I remember hearing like Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner and all these different other songs that my friends would play on bass and stuff. And so I'd learn a little bit, you know, and try to play a little bit. But when I went up to the Panhandle, there wasn't a lot of guitar players, and I had a friend of mine that played guitar, and I ended up just kind of switching and saying, okay, I'm going to play guitar now. So the rest is history. But I still played bass through high school. I played in jazz band. I played in show choir. I actually got a scholarship at my community college because I could read music. So it was one of those. It wasn't hard to do. They were like, look, we need a bass player in our show band. And I walked up and he said, can you read music? And I was like, yep. He says, go get your books. That's how hard it was to get into that program. And so I went and I played and attended the community college there through a little scholarship. But, so that stuck with me. And I played bass I played bass in a local band around here. I started with Fun Pipe, which is out now playing. So we started that. I was one of the first guys in there.
Yeah. Fun Pipe has been a cover band in sort of the Brevard County area, and they've been together for a long time. They're still together, as far as I know.
Yeah.
That's so interesting hearing that you were originally a bass player. Did you learn that first? I mean, did you learn to play bass before learning to play guitar? Or?
It was all at the same time. The acoustic, I pushed that thing to the limits. I started reading, I started really, that's where my kind of skill, if you want to say, came into like learning songs. I mean, I was pretty into, Guitar Player magazine was out. It was really popular. Then Guitar for the Practicing Musician was a big publication. So there's lots of tab and stuff there, but I would sit there and I would figure out stuff on my own. And I remember I got one of my first tab books was a Stryper book, the Soldiers Under Command album. And I sat and learned that on acoustic. I remember doing bends on that thing. That thing, if you try to do bends on acoustic, you know how hard it is. But at the same time, I was playing bass. It was funny. I remember some friends of mine that they had a band, and they asked. I think I remember saying, look, I can play bass for you guys. And I remember I went there and I started playing something, and I wasn't good. And then after we got done, I heard that they were making fun of me. They were like teasing me or something, saying, oh, I sucked or whatever. And that really kind of got to me, right? So it was kind of reverse psychology. And I remember going for a month or two. I don't know how long it took, but I learned some Petra song. Petra's pretty soft in comparison to Striper, and learned it note for note. Went back and played this, and they were all like just amazed. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you can play that song!" But so that was the end of that, and from then on, I was kind of the well, they didn't know too many bass players, but I caught on fairly quickly. But yeah, no, I still, it helps. I love to do recording at home, and I've got a nice little portable studio here, and I have my bass, and so I've always kind of, it's been nice that I've been able to play bass as well, and that's about all I can really do is bass and guitar. I was never really good at anything else, but in the digital world, I can hold my own, I guess. But
yeah, well, I mean, so much so that, and I wasn't even going to get into this until a little later, but you've been kind of engineering and sort of co-producing the latest Vertebreaker EP, which we're still working on right now. A lot of that has been done in your house and also at the Zone with Mark Brazel. So, yeah, a lot of different stuff. You've been getting very active in terms of that end of it.
Yeah, no, that's been really, that's, for any, I don't know what the demographic of your, listeners are, but, I go back to the 4-track days, tape 4-track, and even before that, when you didn't have any money, I would record on one. I'd have 2 or 3 tape players, just standard tape players, and I would record myself on one. Then I'd get the second one ready, and I'd play the first one and play the track, and then I'd play overdubs. So I did this real cheap way of doing overdubs, and had 3 different tape players. It sounded horrible, but it got the job done, right? But I never had any. I mean, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so forget buying crazy expensive audio gear or even 4-tracks. So if I got a chance to borrow something or work on a friend's, I think I borrowed one of my friends from junior high. He had a 4-track, or it might have been high school. I can't remember. But that's when I started really kind of messing with that stuff. So it's really graduated from that. And I have to credit Mark Brazel at the Zone. I've known him productions. I've known him for a long time. He got me into digital recording. I want to say he got me into, maybe helped me on Cakewalk, and which was a software program, DAW, digital audio workstation.
Yeah.
So and then got me into Pro Tools, and Pro Tools was the one that, of course, most people were. There's so many out there now, but it was the king for a while, and I think it's still on top. But there's just software is just blowing up like crazy. I mean, you can record, just several tracks, multi-track recording studios on your iPad. I mean, it's crazy. I've got one now that I've been messing with. It's still not like Pro Tools, but it's very powerful. So who knows where Pro Tools is going to go from here. But yeah, no, I really enjoy doing that. I was a teacher for, actually since I was in high school. I started teaching guitar, and that really wasn't, oh great, look at me, I'm so good, I can teach. That was, hey, I need money. And so it was a small local music store, very small, and I remember actually skipping some school to go teach during the day. Can't believe the guy that ran it didn't say, man, hey, don't skip school. But but I knew I was a very small room, and I squeezed in there, and I don't know how long I taught for, but kind of continued up until my early 30s, off and on, of just kind of teaching. But it's always been in my blood, because I ended up doing, you're into podcasting. I started a podcast in 2007.
Was the podcast about music?
I did a guitar podcast. It was called GuitarCast Online, and it was my first foray into that relatively new medium.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said it was like 2007. I mean, podcasting really wasn't even that popular back then. It's right. Only in recent years has it gotten really, really popular.
I know. I mean, that was, for me, it was trying to figure out. It was kind of like, I feel like, I mean, there was plenty of podcasts out there. I remember Adam Curry from MTV, when he was a VJ on MTV. He had a real popular podcast at the time.
Right.
But I haven't followed much of that lately. But I know that the guitar podcast, it was taking those concepts, having some guest speakers in there, having things that I had taught over the years in there. It was really tough because I've always, honestly, I'm a visual guy, so I've always been into video podcasting. So it would take me about 8 or 9 hours to do one episode, and that was like a 30-minute episode because I would do all the camera work and everything and green screen, and it was, I had lights. It was super hot in the office, and I remember my kid was, what was it, 2004? Yeah, he was only 3, so I remember he was still taking naps, so I would sneak in after he went down for a nap. Usually,
Right.
That's when I would do the podcast. But it was a lot of work for very little return, and not financially, but just I think people. It's sad, and I found myself the same way. I mean, I don't do it much anymore, but you get all this. You're like, hey, it's free. Oh, okay, free trial. Well, I don't want to pay for the software, but then you
Mm-hmm.
think about when you look at that. I mean, there's maybe this guy that's put all his heart and soul into this software that maybe give him a donation or something. So, but do we ever give donations? Rarely do we like, oh, we just go to the next, free software. And now, of course, there's so much out there that's free. It's crazy,
Yeah.
if you're smart enough about it, you can still generate that revenue with, and keep it free for a while. But I think for me at the time, it was people would email me and they just wanted more, right? They wanted like, all these different things that I wasn't podcasting on yet. And I was like, I think I got kind of irritated, like, hey, dude, man, this takes forever to do, do you realize how much, so basically everybody wanted something for free. And so I kind of got a little disgruntled, but so I said, you know what, I'll take a break. And I didn't. And then I ended up getting into, I always wanted to get my pilot's license. So I ended up, going crazy, which if anybody knows me well, they know that I'm a bit of an extremist when it comes to like when I get into something, I go full on and I get obsessed with it. And
Definitely. I hadn't even mentioned yet, but yeah, you're a licensed pilot, which is really awesome.
yeah, and that's kind of what, when I started doing that, I went basically directly from that podcast and I had been doing like flight simulators and things like that. And I said, you know what? I forgot. I mean, I didn't forget. Somebody turned me on to a flying club locally, and I found out the cost, and I was like, I think I probably can do this. So I sold a bunch of, I sold one of my amps, I sold one of my guitars, sold some things. I was like, I'm going to do this. Well, I still love podcasting, so I said, look, if I'm flying, I could just somehow do a podcast, and I don't have to think about the content. That's the hardest part, right? You know it. I mean, it's coming up. Okay. I mean, getting people on your podcast is cool because it does create that content for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on your own, you got to think about things to talk about. But I knew
You
that,
didn't really have a lot in the way of like guests and everything. It was mainly you doing it everything by yourself.
yeah, the idea with the guitar one was, hey, let's get some guests I got one of my buddies on there who's actually in Fun Pipe, just a phenomenal guitar player. And it was one of those, hey, it's cool, but it was still a lot of production involved because of just capturing the guitar and getting the guitar to sound right and getting the camera lighting. And it was crazy. So I thought, okay, wonder if I can do something with aviation and during my flying lessons. So what happened is I ended up finding a way to mount a camera inside the airplane to get the audio from the intercom into the camera. So I had this neat little setup, and I asked my flight instructor, who happened to be, I think he was 18. I mean, he was super young. I mean, he was like, and one of the older flight instructors said, hey, I taught this guy, nothing to worry about. He's excellent. And he turned out, we still are good friends to this day, but he is a great flight instructor. But I was like, do you mind if I put this camera up in here? I'm doing a podcast. And he didn't even know. This is 2007 still. It was November of 2007. So the content just came in. I had like a backlog of lessons that I recorded. I would record an intro. I ended up, it's where I kind of came with my format of like driving in the car and talking, because the great thing about that is the lighting is awesome, right? So, you don't have to worry about cameras. The camera lighting. If you pick the right time of day and you're driving along, and it's awesome. The camera.
Oh yeah, and we've incorporated that into the band. I mean, so many videos you captured from either like live footage or just like stuff in the car and other stuff. Like even when like Jarrett was first auditioning for us, you caught on like your GoPro cameras, and
Yeah.
you've been mainly kind of overseeing a lot of like the band's YouTube page in terms of posting new stuff on there all the time. So it's been awesome.
Well, it came from that podcasting kind of thing of figuring out ways to but I really at the time, I mean, if you look, and it'd be hard to find, but I'm not a person to brag. I don't do it all, but I know video podcasting for aviation was very slim. I mean, there was I think one or two guys out there that were doing it. One guy was doing it really well, but he was a flight instructor, and he would just give tips, and he had great stuff that he would talk about, right? But it was never like a full blown, here's my private pilot training. So I would imagine that I was one of the first ones out there doing that. People were doing audio podcasts all over the place, but I was like, well, it's aviation. What's the fun of listening to somebody talk on an intercom? We want to see what's in the cockpit, So I was really excited about that. And then I incorporated some guitar stuff because I record some of the intro in it. So I wrote like a little, intro song to it. And so I kind of was able to really do a lot of cool things with that.
Kind of mix those two worlds together.
Yeah, and being a tech guy, I mean, it was like, hey, it was right when the iPhone 3G came out, and then, of course, there was no video on that iPhone. You couldn't do video. The 3GS introduced video camera, so I remember sticking that up in a mount in the cockpit and trying to, okay, how can I get this mobile? And then it wasn't for a while until the GoPros came out and even then, GoPros caused that the propeller to look really odd. If you've seen those people, it's like when they're shooting out of a cockpit, it shows a propeller, but you can see the propeller because it's got a rolling shutter, or it's just the way that the frame rate is on the camera. So I never liked those, but they've come so far now, and I think that it's really exciting where technology is. But now you got people doing. And I've done it too, but they do multiple camera shoots, and we've done them for Vertebreaker as well. So
it almost sounds like what you're describing is like, because this is an audio podcast, but like a video podcast. Would you also call it like a vlog, like like a video blog?
Yeah, you could definitely call it. I mean, I ended up because I was strictly iTunes, and I had a website that would feed. Would look for those RSS feeds where the videos would come up. So things would pull down from the website. I was very hesitant to put things on YouTube because YouTube can be so brutal, and it'll if you're not that type of person to come back and no one, it's useless to argue with the haters, right? So,
right.
But you end up like taking a hit because you're like, man, I brought you into here for something that cost me a lot of money, but people are always so critical, and they just don't. There's going to be haters everywhere you go, and people are no different on aviation podcasts. Oh, you should have done it this way. I can't believe he's teaching you this. You did that maneuver wrong, and you're like, man, whatever. Okay, I'm just giving you free content here, So, but most of the people are pretty cool, but there's. But yeah, I got a pretty good following. I still get people that hit me up from the podcast, not as much because I don't promote it as much. But it's cool to see that it's taken off, And but yeah, no, I can anything tech related. I mean, I just started my Facebook. I hate to say fan page because it sounds so.
Well, I mean, it's it's like a Facebook, band page where you can, as opposed to a personal profile. I know I have one which I plug at the end of every episode. So I mean, you finally gotten that in terms of like putting out content, like you mentioned, the blogs and different tutorials and stuff like that.
Yeah, it gets me what I really, if I have the time, and because I'm all over the place, but I love. I thought because everybody, you can relate to it. The band is one world, and my career and my circle of friends are another world. Whereas maybe most people there's a lot of people in their early, I would say most of the younger ones, I think that it's all one now because they're just maybe doing it, everything kind of molds together. And mine did too. But as I got older, things started to separate a little bit. Friends didn't want to come watch bands play, so you end up having those two separate little circles there. And I think that for me, I get that stuff starts to pull into like my personal page. So, I get, I don't know, you probably I get people that are on the band side who, friend me on Facebook, right? Well, it's one of those where, I don't really know these people that well. So, maybe I can start something where I can say, you know what, I can embrace that on my own personal musician page. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm trying to pull some of that over to my personal Greg Summers page, where it's like, look, I can talk guitar, nerd talk, and band talk like 24 hours a day. And it's dedicated to that. So it's not here, leave me alone on my personal page. It's more or less, hey, let me just talk about what I really want to talk about, to this crowd, I guess. And so it's just in the beginning. I mean, I don't have that many followers on there, but I think for me, I've always been the one that's kind of a little more reserved, and I'd like to actually promote, Vertebreaker, and in the process myself kind of a brand for both places, and to have where, look, I love talking, gear talk and all that stuff, so it gives me an opportunity to show maybe some cool things that I've, like the studio stuff. Hey, well, we've done this hybrid kind of project right now with Mark, where we're recording some of it at my house, and then the bulk of it, like vocals and drums, are being done in the studio where he has those kind of facilities that he can do that. I'm just a small office here, so guitars, bass, any kind of, Rod and I call it like, sprinkles, and, we can do all here, and we can save a lot of money because, I mean, face it, we all have families and responsibilities, and we can't blow all of our money on the studio,
Absolutely, and I think what you're doing with your Facebook page is good for a lot of reasons. Like, hang on, you said, Greg, I want to apologize for the background noise. Obviously, it's Christina trying to put her 2 cents in.
Hi,
And,
Greg.
Hello.
Yes, Christina says hi. Greg says hi, honey.
Aww.
Yes. I want to introduce you to Greg's wife, Stacy. You two would get along very well. Anyway.
Yeah, so, I think that
She does have a crazy husband like you do.
Oh, we would get along.
Exactly. Sorry about that. I'm going to edit that out.
That's funny. Yes. She's been through the band thing, and she's done with the band thing.
Exactly. I remember the first time Christina came to see like one of my shows. This is before Vertebreaker. It was like she was all nervous. She came there with a girlfriend of hers. She was like, Jack, are people gonna like jump around and scream at me? I'm like, well, I will, but I don't know about anyone else. But so it was a bit of a culture shock. But she, amazingly, she's still with me. So I don't know.
Well, I think what's funny is I'll keep it G-rated, but early on when the wife, I was trying to remember. Let's see. So when I got with Rod, I think it was 1995.
Yeah.
So,
How did you two guys meet, by the way?
well, actually, we met through my wife worked with a high school kind of friend of hers that she'd known forever, and she was dating her husband now, but she was dating her boyfriend Jeff, and Jeff and Rod grew up together, and so they were longtime friends. And I remember, and that's what I was trying to get to earlier, but I forgot. But high school, there was nobody. We couldn't find anybody. We never found a vocalist. Forget finding vocalists. You could always maybe find another guitar player, maybe a drummer that could get through, barely play. And that's basically what we had. We had people. We never had a singer in our band. So when I remember they said, hey, we got a buddy my buddy is in this band called GHN, and they play it in this club called Barracudas, which was in Cocoa. And I remember going to watch these guys, and I was like, oh my God, they have a smoke machine in the stage. And, at 23 or whatever, I hadn't experienced anything like that yet. And so watching these guys, they were like gods, I'm like, their original band, these guys are going to make it or whatever, And
it was something you weren't used to.
Yeah, because we didn't have the right people around the area. I mean, I grew up around Fort Walton Beach, but we were, in Destin area up in the Panhandle. But where I was at, there was nobody. You had to really be around in Fort Walton, which the bass player from Creed, or now Alter Bridge,
Brian Marshall.
Brian Marshall graduated Fort Walton, I think.
Oh, get out! That's awesome.
So, of course, we were in high school around the same time, but I didn't know him at that time, I guess. But so when I saw these guys, it was like, man, I wish I could play in a band like that. Well, just so happened, I guess they ended up, their guitar player quit or whatever, and I was working at a music store in Cocoa, and Rod came in, or Rod or the drummer, I can't remember. But I remember them saying, like, it just so happens we have an opening in our band, and I can't remember if I begged them to get in there. I don't know. I was pretty desperate to play with these guys though, and they had a CD, and at the time they had an email address. That was a big deal.
Right? Yeah, that was.
I was like, these guys have an email.
Wow.
Like, they must be. So we're talking 95. I mean, I'm trying to think of.
That was a huge deal then.
Right. Not many people had, but their guitar player actually, who I'm still friends with, but very smart guy, wrote back in that time frame, wrote a book on C+ programming. He was writing his own operating system. This guy was like super smart.
Right. Very similar to yourself in that, you're both, into guitar and into IT. So it's like technically minded.
I know. And it's funny because, I wasn't at the time. I didn't get into IT till around 97, something like that, 96. And, he was just like, I was like, man, this guy's awesome, whatever. But anyway, so eventually I went and I tried out, and it wasn't much of a tryout. It was just like, hey, you're kind of in. And I played, there was another guitar player that was with us named Pete. And so it was just such a neat opportunity for me. And I remember the first show, I mean, it was the nerves I was freaking out. That show is a blur to me to this day, because just getting up there and playing with these guys was, I thought that everything was going to be, we were going to just like, we were going to make it. That was my opportunity. So, that part in the beginning with the wife, she liked that. She liked watching me play, but we had just been married, and, she was kind of thrust into a lot of this, practicing all the time. And, we always called it like two ships passing in the night. We were just, she was working, I was working, I was in the band, and it was, so a lot of that led up to, after 20 something years of like, okay, yeah, I'm over this kind of thing.
Dude, I'm going through that right now. I mean, in terms of stuff like that, it's just, it's just one of those things where, but I mean, it's like, just because of that, it doesn't mean she loves you any less or anything like that. It's just, it's a different experience for different people. Like, like my wife, for example, like she can't really, like the cigarette smoke in a lot of these clubs that we play, like she physically gets sick from it.
Yeah.
So it's not that she doesn't want to come see us play. It's just, is stuff like that. It's just, it's uncomfortable. And then obviously it's like, we'll be scheduled to go on at a certain time, but we won't get on until like a half hour later. And so that drives her nuts. So understandably so, I get that. But
you can give her some encouragement to know that at least you're not playing in a cover band that plays from 9 to 1.
That's true. That's true. Our sets are not 4 hours long. So
I mean, I play after after GHN kind of disbanded, I went into the cover band scene because you actually make money in the cover band scene.
Yes, you
And
do.
and so I could buy gear. It's the funny thing that people actually paid to watch cover bands, but you get in these places that are just reeking of smoke. I mean, and you're in there, your eyes are burning so badly, and you're just playing for 4 sets. Got a 10 or 15 minute break. It's tough, man.
Yeah, it's not too fun to sing in either.
No, it's really so those kind of. I mean, she came into a lot of those shows, and hey, I get it. It's just it's not for everybody. And if you're not a smoker,
Right.
And you're not in that kind of drinking and smoking kind of lifestyle, it really it's just not your thing. And so I have to say that honestly, the bar scene is not my thing either. I just don't.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I don't go out. I love to play out. I love to play on stage. I love to play in front of people, but the bar scene is not my scene.
Exactly. I'm exactly the same way.
Yeah. So, I got to give Ryan a lot of credit, and Rod when he goes, when he's able to as well. But Ryan is like the guy around town. Everybody knows Ryan. He is like this spokes. If it wasn't for him, I don't know how much they would know about Vertebreaker. I don't know, because he's in the local scene, and
he really has been like the MVP in terms of like going to other band shows and other things like that around the area. I mean, it's tough for me because I live all the way in Orlando, but I mean, certainly the rest of us sometimes have a tougher time getting out to shows as much. I think Jarrett's gotten out a little bit more, but yeah, I mean, but Ryan has been like the guy, he's like, for being as quiet as he is, he's become kind of like the social butterfly in a lot of ways in terms of like, showing up and representing at other people's shows. I remember he and I went to Breathing Theory's music video shoot over here in Orlando. He's very comfortable in that kind of environment, and I think that's great.
Yeah, and he's after our shows, he's going to be the guy that's right there and watching the rest of the bands play. And the wife sometimes it's funny. She kind of makes she pokes at me a little bit. It's like, oh, you gotta pay your respects, because she's like, what time are you going to be home? And I was like, well, you got to pay respects. I forgot. And I'm like, okay, yeah. But, we try to, if we, sometimes we just physically, we can't. Sometimes we're just really tired and everybody, you got something going on the next day or whatever. But we
especially if we're playing like an out of town show and we need to get back home.
Yeah, and we try to show the band some love there. But yeah, sometimes it's just not possible with the schedule. But I do enjoy a good show, like an organized show. I get really, that's probably, you mentioned something about organization. I don't do well with chaos. I don't do well with chaos at work. I'm a fairly unorganized guy outside of that. But when my work life or band life is unorganized, it kind of drives me crazy. So, yeah. And I, you mentioned, I'm the guy that's a little more reserved. I think internally, probably not. I just hold myself back a little bit. And some of those things that, where when I'm playing and I feel that emotion when I'm playing, a lot of times I don't let it show out there because I'm very aware of what maybe people might think, which is a downfall of that I've always had, where I'm like, you know what, I could probably play a lot better if I would just maybe get into it a little more. And
I mean, I think a lot of guys are like that because they're very concerned about playing all the right notes and all that stuff, which, I mean, you do anyway, but it's, but at the same time, it's like, playing the notes is one thing, but it's also how you play as opposed to what you play. And I think you do a good job of balancing like the more technical side of playing with just like putting a lot of feeling into it. Like, you're able to shred and play like a million notes a minute, but you're also able to like hold a note out and like play like sort of a bluesy or a funky thing in addition to like, to like something heavy. And, you're a very versatile guitar player. And I think that's brought out such a great deal of variety in our sound. And I know it's rubbed off on Ryan quite a bit. and I know you guys have a pretty unique chemistry as far as that goes, in terms of your styles of playing complementing each other. Would you agree? I mean, or at least how would you feel is like the dynamic between you and Ryan at this point?
Well, Ryan is like really one of the more perfect guitar players to be around because he's so laid back. I really kind of I see a lot of things that I know Ryan wants to. There's a weird balance where you have to go because I'm the first person to say, man, I want to be better. I want to be. There's a lot of frustrating things where I hear, the guitar player out there that I wish I could play like this guy or whatever. And Ryan's always, gets real shy. He's like, man, I wish I could do that. I'm like, so I kind of almost have this, a big brother kind of thing, maybe a little bit where I go, here, let's, because I know that I've grown. I feel like I've grown so much and I've learned so much since those first days of GHN. So I look back at starting out then and know where I was at. I was, all about get up there and let's just rip as fast as I can because I want to show people that I know how to play, right? So, you want to shred, right? But, and I still do some of that a little bit. But in the end, though, I'm very cautious about let's make it about the song because realistically nobody really cares about that. You have your guitar players, but they don't appreciate like if you play 1,000,000 notes a minute or 2 or 3 notes, it's almost like, hey, they don't look at that because that's not how they're thinking unless they're musicians, and the musicians in the crowd you can always tell because they got their arms crossed.
Right. And I think you and Ryan are also very underrated in terms of like putting together like song structure and stuff like that, which I know Ryan gets down on himself for not being enough of like a big solo guy, but in terms of like the riffs he puts out and some of the arrangements that he comes up with, as well as the ones that you come up with as well, I think really provide like a dynamic that really makes our band unique. I mean, like we'll play stuff like In the Name, for example. That'll be like a really like fast, like almost Avenged Sevenfold, Bullet for My Valentine riff kind of thing. And then like one of the first songs you brought to the band, Divided, that's almost like a moodier, like Alice in Chains kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I know. Yeah, Ryan, you're right. I mean, he does. When he plays, and he does do. He's got his own thing. He's got some cool technical things that aren't in my comfort zone, right? So it's relative. Like I always tell people when they're playing, you might look at somebody and say, "Wow, this guy is awesome." Well, that's his stuff. He's playing what's comfortable for him. So you might play a riff or something that is comfortable for you, where he's like, "That just isn't. It just feels unnatural to me." And so. Everybody can learn something from everybody. So I've always tried to remain humble. And when you get older, it doesn't really matter. I mean, and at the end of the day, you're just out there. You want to put together something to go. I mean, I'm very serious about my tone and the gear that I use. And I'm always, trying to perfect some of that. I think most guitar players are, and so I'm into like boutique amps and but everything's so expensive. There's just not enough money to buy all the toys that I want to buy. But
right, that's why we got to rack up some of these endorsements, man. I'm telling you.
I know. And I think that's the cool thing. That where the tech comes in, where I kind of have started some of my my own page is to kind of showcase some of those things and some of the unique things that maybe people aren't thinking about, how people are using technology to kind of record new techniques or different ways that you can capture live sound or just being guitar nerds in general. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but it's kind of fulfills both sides of my interests, Well,
it's also one of those things, I mean, you're putting, it's all about putting yourself out there, saying that, hey, the band isn't all about just like one guy or one or two guys. Like we're also made up of individuals. and we all have our own things to contribute and our own ways to kind of create, almost your own brand. I mean, I know that's been kind of thrown about. It's kind of an eye-rolling thing at this point, but yeah, it's like, in a sense, you're kind of building your own personal brand, and you're building a connection with people, and whether that's through instructional things or, other entertainment things you like to talk about, like that's what this podcast is for me. Your instructional videos are for you in terms of like, something else you can put out there besides just making music.
Yeah, and I think that's real important. I almost mentioned that brand thing. It's so early for me. I've never really concentrated on my brand personally.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of, I think it's important for everybody in our band to maybe focus on some of that, because it happens, and it's kind of the new thing with, not new, but it's very common now. Each band member generally has their own kind of social media kind of outlet, and then they have their band outlet, so you get to know that person, outside of just a band situation. Because, I mean, when you're in a band, you're playing for the band. You're not showcasing yourself necessarily. Yeah, you do get to do that, but it's not really the right medium to be, it's not the Greg show. It's not the Jack or the whatever show. But,
right.
Well, for the most part, actually, it is a lot of the Jack show.
That's not true.
you are that front person. So, that's you are the face of Vertebreaker, and that holds a lot. So,
well, I mean, for me, I've always looked at it like, and like one of my heroes, Freddie Mercury, always said the same thing. He's like, look, just because I'm the lead singer doesn't mean I'm like the leader of the band or whatever. It's like, a band is made up of many different parts, and that was never my intention to be like sort of like the center of everything. It's like, yeah, it's my voice up there. Yeah, I'm out front, but we're 5 characters, man. And I think to what you're saying about, the social media and each guy having his own outlet, I think it works. Like, Rod and I are, complete goofballs. We like to get on our videos, our post-practice clips each week and, do something. Ryan and Jared are a little more on the quiet side. But Jarrett's definitely coming out of his shell a lot, and you're kind of like in the middle, where kind of on the more serious side of things, but also like you're the tech guy, and you're able to like, work a lot behind the scenes as well as put forth like the instructional stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think ultimately, like for me, like my one of my, if you want to say, dreams when you're older, that okay, if I can't go out there and make music for a living and actually have that as my career or whatever. I've always wanted to have this. I thought about like my home studio. Everything's all set up all the time. My band that's where we hold band practices. It's our home. It's our place to hang out and come up with ideas. I don't feel like we have that right now. But I think it's, just, it's tough, because you got to have that spot that is isolated enough that it doesn't come into your, that doesn't intrude on your home.
Right.
So basically, you got to have a soundproof room in the back that is just your man cave, that you can have these things. But that's really, even for Vertebreaker, I thought, I was like, man, that ultimately what I'd love to have is this place that was designed just as our chill room. That was, we come in and I just get behind a console, I press record, and we just record our practices. We have, and then you come up with something one day that you're like, hey, wow, I captured this and we didn't even mean to, kind of thing. But is our place to kind of just really feed off of that energy that I think is kind of lacking. I'm hoping to get there, but it's kind of tough. Before Jarrett came on, we were over at our old drummer's house,
mm-hmm.
and that was a good thing. I mean, it was definitely something where our gear was always set up, and that's been the tough thing. But I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for Jarrett offering up his place, I don't know what we would have done. So, hats off to Jarrett for.
It probably would have been more expensive for us to like rent a rehearsal studio or do stuff like that.
It would have been tough. So you have to look at, we lost something with when we changed lineups, so we gained a lot.
Yeah, like we said, to your point, I mean, we used to practice in Steve's woodshed, behind his house, and he had a pretty good setup. But I think given what we have right now, even with Jarrett's house, I think we do pretty good with what we have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely got a bachelor pad for sure. So, but I think, I don't think it's over with for, what I have in my ultimate goal to have something that is our rehearsal space. I've seen there's a couple other bands I've seen that they kind of have that available to them, and so maybe one day we'll have that in place.
I mean, you never know. Those kind of things take like time and investment and stuff like that, and
for sure. But I don't know. I think that I don't have any. It's funny that as of right now, I mean, I'm 2 years into this, and I'm still, it's still relevant for me. Where I'm just like, I think all of us. I'm speaking for everybody only because I'm hoping everybody's being honest with us. But we all are pretty solid as to how we feel about the band, and there's no thoughts that come in like for me that are, they're like, oh well, let's see, maybe I'll do this for a little longer and go to something else. It's always been, okay, what's next? So that's a good thing because
and I'm glad to hear that because I know originally when you came in, I know there was.
That was not the case.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot of talk I think on both ends where it's like, well, we're not really sure if Greg's going to stick around a lot. We don't know how he feels about it, and by all accounts, it seems like you're in.
Yeah, no, it really hasn't even been.
And of course, like 2 years on, obviously you're a big part of the band, so I'm glad to hear that you still get that fulfillment out of it. Do you remember like what? Was there like a particular thing or particular moment where you realized like, yeah, I really want to give this a shot again. I feel like I can really, really do something with this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I'm always pretty honest with people that I think there was part selfish on my part of saying, okay, this will push me into like really focus on. I'm all about, we talk it at work all the time, and I'm, in tech, it's like, there's got to be a good workflow, and I'm all about that organization and that workflow. But I always wanted to have that with my gear and everything. I was like, look, I can focus, I can put some money into my stuff, I can really hone that setup there. So some of that was there. Obviously, the bigger thing was, do I enjoy playing with these guys, and do I enjoy writing, Original music is, I don't think if I was in a cover band, I would have lasted this long. Because it's just, first of all, that it's very hard. It's hard work. And, lots of weekends of just Saturday and Sunday of going out there and like we said before, playing long nights. But I don't remember, I think it was definitely around the Jarrett time. That was a big turning point for me because, I was always like with Steve, it was sad because it was like, look, I was fine. Like Steve, we got along with him. And it was just some of those things that we just couldn't deal with. And, it was sad. It was like, look, we have this thing going. He's got a lot of drive. He's got, but there was just some of those deal breakers for me that I was like, look, I just can't handle that anymore. So, I think we're at my breaking point, and I don't know if hope I wasn't the total cause of it, but I'm sure I influenced it some.
No, and it's like, and look, we don't have to get too deep into it. I don't really want to bash anyone publicly behind their back, and I know that's not what you're trying to do, but just that situation was what it was. But you lost, you lose something, but at the same time you gain something, like you mentioned before, and it was just a change that needed to happen, and it worked out better, hopefully for everybody. I don't wish any ill on anyone.
There's no reason when you get along as well as you do. That's very hard to find, and there's going to be times that everybody can piss people off and, can hurt people's feelings or whatever. But, that's why I talk about it. We've talked about it before, is you got to be honest with people. And no matter what happens, everybody needs to be on the same page in a band. Because what I always say, there's always one, right? There's always, we're always like, there's always one guy. It's less in Vertebreaker, right? Everybody still has their. I wouldn't say that statement applies too much in Vertebreaker. There's every now and then you got something you got to deal with, but for the most part,
the funny thing is, I've said stuff like that too, and it's like with this band, it's like I don't really find anyone who's that, and I think I'm like, oh my god, am I the guy?
right. And I don't think it's, and no, we kind of got past that one. That's not to say, like we said, we don't have any disagreements, but I think if we can all, agree on things, and that's the hardest. I mean, it's really tough in any band, right? But I see so much out there on Facebook and so much disagreement, and so much, of that same scenario. There's always one guy, and it breaks apart bands, and I think that. Well, what helps out is we don't make that much money, so you can't fight for money. So,
well, I mean, plus I think we all just have kind of interesting life experiences.
Yeah.
And we've all like been around the block a little bit in terms of like local bands and everything. So I think we've kind of gotten a lot of that stuff out of the way when we were younger.
I set expectations. I mean, that's what I always tell about anything. Is like, look, like the podcasting. I went into my second podcast. I said, you know what? I don't expect anything in return.
Right.
So I went in there, and that's what I had to. It was really tough for me in the beginning because we were, I was spending money, right, and I was, not used to that in a while. So I was like, wait, I'm going in the hole with this band. So from a financial standpoint, it was tough for me to like swallow because I'm like, oh great, now I gotta. The wife isn't too crazy about the band to begin with. Now I got to say maybe, okay, we're spending money to play. And so it's a tough thing. We're trying to, break past a lot of that. But after a while, it just I got used to it. It was like, hey, it's not about that. I knew I wasn't going to make anything, but now you kind of like, look, this is something we enjoy and we don't maybe mind making some investments here and there.
Yeah. And I don't think we're necessarily like at the point where we're like so jaded to it where we don't even try, because we do try.
Yeah. I think we're, we've obviously been playing for long enough to not that we have some sort of leverage. I don't think we're there at all. I think we're still trying to gather that following, but we've got a good rapport with most of these places that we can pick and choose sometimes and say, hey, we don't feel this is the right one for us. We're not necessarily desperate for shows where they're not beating down our door, but at the same time, we're able to kind of pick. And we've got a good team that we work with that really watches out for us, I think, and understands and is very supportive.
Absolutely.
So those James Cripps and those guys. So I think that that's a good thing, and if you have some people behind you. So
yeah, I mean, we've been lucky enough to meet people who have helped us out along the way, like James Cripps, like Chris Sherry, like Chris Marsh, and like Al Corey. So we're very fortunate to be.
Thanks for mentioning the other ones that I didn't mention. Sorry, guys. No.
I mean, I know
good.
You were getting there. You were bringing it back around.
Exactly. I was getting there. So
exactly.
But I think that all those people that you mentioned are very genuine, I think, about looking out for people around, because they do want to see the scene succeed and they want to make something. And whether it happens or not, they're all kind of looking. We've had our fair share of the people who aren't out for us, and generally they're people out of town. But which is a sad part, because we'd really like to play out more and play away from to spread it, have some diversity when we play out. But I think we're getting there. We've got a couple shows this weekend, and by the time you hear this, we'll have completed those shows.
We're doing our first run in Georgia as we record this. By the time this is out, that'll already be over with.
It's going to be definitely interesting. I haven't played out of state in probably since the GHN days, so it's nice.
It'll be the five of us, our first experience, like kind of all of us on the road together. That should be fun.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be a long weekend, but I think that that to go out and maybe make some contacts out of state and kind of, test the waters a little bit would be cool. So.
Absolutely. Quick side note, you had mentioned because a lot of your vlogs and podcasts were sort of more like instructional in nature and more like, have you ever thought about setting up private Skype sessions and maybe if there was enough interest there, maybe doing some private Skype guitar lessons or something, maybe that as being a possible source of revenue a little bit?
I mean, I think with the bandwidth the way it is now, I think it was always. And back in '99, I had bought a domain called learnguitarnow.com, and me and my former boss, who got me my first IT job, he was a guitar player as well. So he was one of my students actually. So that's
nice.
That's how I got my first job. So
there you go.
So we were going to go through this big curriculum and do all this stuff, but we didn't complete that. But there's so much of that going on right now, and I think that I definitely would like that in a limited capacity, only because I guess if they were coming to me enough and saying, hey, we really we really like to, just teaching private lessons, it was always tough for me because I was teaching the most probably during, I wouldn't say Guitar Hero days, but that was the last part of my teaching was when Guitar Hero came out. So these kids were coming up basically inspired, which was cool because I think I don't know. I'm curious because the shift has gotten back to shredders now.
I know it's a great thing. I think that video game has done a lot to for our kind of music and for music that we grew up with in terms of promoting that to the younger generation. And it was probably good for business at the time.
Yeah, and I think that, but the downside is most kids came out, and they were they learned quickly that it was not like Guitar Hero.
Right.
And of course for me, I've never ever been able to play that game because it doesn't.
Right. And you play it for real, but it's tougher to do the video game.
No, because you're not playing the guitar part. So for me, I was half those songs I learned and played before when I was younger. So I could play it, and it just wouldn't make sense. It didn't feel natural. But so a lot of those kids were in for a rude awakening there. But I think. I was just thinking this today. I was watching. I mean, there's so many phenomenal guitar players out now, and I'm where were these guys during the early 2000s and the
late 90s?
Late 90s. Where were they hiding? Because I mean, I guess I'm curious what started that shift because
yeah, man, there was a time where a lot of the lead guitar stuff was unfashionable.
Oh, it was terrible for me because I grew up in the days of shred. So
right,
it.
And I think in some circles we're still kind of getting over that.
Yeah, maybe. I was watching some demo videos today on a product that I actually purchased a piece of rack gear, and there was all these artists that they were bringing in to kind of demo this gear. And I was like, oh my gosh, where these guys, they were just unbelievable guitar players, studio musicians and maybe, some Nashville guys or whatever. But, it's just weird because I remember the day. I mean, Guns N' Roses, right? We talked about it before. Guns N' Roses. This is not derogatory towards them, but they were the start of it. And, when they came out in, 86, 87, right?
87 was when Appetite came out, yeah.
And I remember seeing that one promo pic of Axl. Well, all of them. Axl had teased hair at the time, right? It was it was very brief. So it was they were transitioning from a glam thing, I think. It was, but that didn't last long before he just went straight hair, right? So I remember my brother came home and he said, yeah, I went and saw Motley Crue, Girls tour. He said there was this band, I think it was that tour, but he said there's this band Guns N' Roses opened up for him.
Huh.
And he was like, they were just because, man, they sounded like crap, and he But it was the beginning of the grunge, and I remember he goes, man, the guitar player just like hocked a big old loogie all in the crowd, and of course I've seen that more times than I can count now. Zach Wild does it all the time on stage, and I still find it disgusting. But other than that, that's his thing, whatever. So,
right.
But anyway, and then of course people would argue, but I think that was the start of it, and then Nirvana hit, and it was all done, right? So once Nirvana hit, it was all over. But I remember, I tried to, I had to embrace it. I, listened to Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was transcribed in one of the guitar magazines. Everybody wanted me to play it, so I played it.
Right, and you can't deny that, Slash is a hugely influential guitar player as well, and certainly a guitar hero in his own right.
Well, I think what happened, though, here's what happened. See, Slash didn't change from his original, from what he was doing originally, right? His style has stayed basically the same. So
I mean, I don't know. If you've heard some of like his solo records in the last couple of years, I think he's a lot more versatile than people give him credit for.
Yeah, and you're right, because I haven't listened to the solo. Well, I guess, with the Miles Kennedy stuff. But I mean, I think, he's still got, like, he didn't die, like, he didn't go and change drastically. So I think he's probably what kept that generation going, because he didn't waver too much through the grunge days. So he was still playing, he was
right.
Lead guitar player. So he still had this persona, this lead guitarist persona, which I personally hate that term, lead guitarist. I'm like, look, you're just a guitar player for your band.
Mm-hmm.
You happen to play solos. So I never everybody's like, what do you do? Are you play lead guitar? I'm like, sometimes. Sometimes I will play a solo, but I'm the guitar player of the band. So that,
Well, I mean, I frequently describe you as being sort of the lead guitar player of the band. Well, I mean, in terms of that, as people would understand it, just. I see what you're saying.
Most people do. You're like, no, I want to go. Well, actually, yeah, I play guitar. I just sit out until the solo. So I just hang out the sidelines. I'm like, no, I play guitar the whole time. But I think that, my point being with Slash was that when that grunge came along and we were all sad and we had funeral for 80s hair bands. And he kept it going, and so maybe there was some of that people. There was a lot of people that were highly influenced by Slash. I wasn't one of them, but I think he's good. He wasn't one of my favorites. But he kept the torch going. Let's put it that way.
Interesting point of view.
Yeah, because my guys were, Warren DeMartini and Yngwie Malmsteen,
George Lynch.
George Lynch, those guys, and Slash was nothing like that.
Yeah, well, Slash wasn't as much of a technical player as those guys, but I mean, he had such a tone and feel to his thing. I think that's what resonated with people a lot.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it was one of the raw things of grab a Les Paul and a Marshall and go. Right?
Absolutely, and it's like certain bands have similar sounds, like like AC/DC isn't the most versatile band, but I mean, it's one of those things. You either love them or you don't. It's.
Yeah, and those, we were talking earlier. It's funny, when you think of AC/DC, who do you think of when you think of AC/DC? You mostly think about the guitar player, which is funny. It's not very. I think most people would identify, yes, with the screaming vocals and maybe Brian Johnson, but you think about this kid in a schoolboy uniform. Angus Young. And they might not be able to, even the common people on the street, they might not be able to tell you what his name is.
Right.
But they can go, AC/DC, yeah, I like that. It's that guy with the little schoolboy outfit on, So what do they call that? I say schoolboy. I don't know, but it's Catholic.
Yeah, no, I guess that would be
Is there a technical term for it? But, now I look at, you and I are we have an age, quite a few years between us, but so we have different views of the 80s now. Those are my influences, but it's a lot of it's hard for me to listen to now because it's just, I look at it and I'm like, man, we had some cheesy rock back then, but that's what I grew up on. And so that is my roots, of course, but I have my staples that I really, like Motley Crue to me. They always maintained that raw image, I think.
Definitely.
I think that Rat, one of my other favorites, got kind of cheesy.
Yeah, they did kind of get off the rails a little bit, although they had some really good songs. I mean, Round and Round is such,
that was in the height of their day, so yeah.
Well, I mean, even the way that song is structured, like it could be played on a pop station. It could be, you could change around the arrangement, but just the songwriting in itself is solid.
Yeah, and they were, those kind of, because I over the years people would ask, they'd go, like, man, that's, I wish I could, play lead guitar, and I'm like, look, you understand, we were all in high school, and I think I've matured as a player. I said, but technically, I think I was doing like I was playing probably faster when I was younger. I'm a little more laid back, a little more lazy, a little more reserved, and what my note choice is now, or whatever it may be. But I think I was like, look, we were all trying to compete with each other, and guys playing, Yngwie was a big thing. Everybody's like, if you could play like Yngwie, then you were like really good, right? That was like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the bar. He set the bar, so everybody kind of wanted to play like that. And so technically, him and Paul Gilbert and Racer X, those guys, that was out. That was my time, So all the Musicians Institute guys, all the GIT guys. That's what everybody wanted to go to GIT at Berkeley because those were those players were coming out. Tony McAlpine and who's the other ones? There's I forget. There's so many of them.
I know you're a big Nuno fan as well.
Yeah, the obvious one I didn't even mention Nuno. I remember when they came out with they were on the soundtrack for Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, Nuno. Play with me.
Right. So Nuno, I mean, I didn't at the time. I remember watching the movie. I don't know if I even really thought about it too much until I remember this video came out with Kid Ego. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing it, and it was like, and honestly, it was like other bands out there, like Bang Tango or
right,
where I was like, the guitar player was doing something, but it wasn't enough to catch my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember seeing these guys, and they didn't, And I remember somebody had said, my friend was like, hey, this band Extreme and is playing on the beach at a show. And I was like, is that band, that Kid Ego song? I was like, I don't know, I like that song. I remember. And then, and I think this Pornography came out. And that I kind of revisited that and went back even to the movie. And I was like, this guy is unbelievable. And I still think most underrated guitar player out there. He is, I guess, it brings me back to my point of technical things.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched many guitar players and friends, everybody, and look at a player that's doing something that maybe is fast but not necessarily musical. It's just a bunch of I say noise. I like my dad now, but you watch it and I'm like, man, you don't realize the stuff that Nuno is doing, how difficult that is.
And he also had such a feeling in the way he played too.
Yes, and so for me, he is definitely top on my list.
Definitely. And you had mentioned earlier that you would play in cover bands. I think that experience has suited our band pretty well, just because there have been so many times where it's like either during practice or during a sound check where you'd like try to stump me with something and see if I knew it and I would join in. Like our last show, like you started playing Van Halen, Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do, which is like an obscure tune, but like I started singing that at sound check and people were like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that.
I think that, I think I always can, sometimes I think I look at Rod and I'm like, oh, maybe he's rolling his eyes right now. But I'm like, maybe I can't remember the whole song, but I'm this, over the years of playing all that stuff, or even just learning it for students or just learning it on my own, is I like to, it's my way. I don't get on the microphone. I'm not a singer. It's my way to speak to the crowd and say, hey, check it out. And then you tease them for a little. Most of the time they're like, dang it, why don't you keep playing? And you're like, nah, we're not going to do that. But at least you kind of show them a little bit of a little nugget that you're like, wow, I haven't heard that one. I like to do those, the ones that people haven't heard in like years.
Well, definitely. Plus, it lets people know that, like, yeah, I'm capable of doing these songs as well. And so, if you like this, why don't you listen to our stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have. I don't know if it shows because people maybe I don't hear it as much, but I have heard people talk about that they hear certain influences in our music. I don't. We all come from a lot of different because we have we were age 26 on to 46. I think is what it is right now, right?
Right. Not that we wanted to tip our hand too much, but yeah, there's a little bit of an age spread between I think Jared being the youngest and and yourself, but yeah, I mean, but I think it works out pretty well. I just look at it like we're just one big family.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that we bring. I mean, I've always tried to write things that are current, like what people listen. I listen to what's out there, and although some of the stuff in the recent couple of years, I found myself a little bit not as excited about. I think where music has kind of gone. I think that sometimes it sounds weird. I think maybe something must be changing because a lot of it sounds the same. It's like that there's not too many unique guys that are coming out that I. But then again, so I end up flip flopping the stations. I end up staying on like Ozzy's Boneyard or Hair Nation or whatever. Probably Ozzy's Boneyard more than anything. I go back to I have satellite, so I go back to Octane, and it's like I got the same kind of sound anymore. So I'm really waiting for the next chapter. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are definitely a lot of good players out there, a lot of really good, hotshot lead guitar players out there. A lot of guys like just last week I had Zach from Falling in Reverse on my show, and they've had a lot of really good guitar players come through that band. And from his old band Black Tide, those guys can really, really shred. One of my favorite bands out of California is Burn Halo. Shout out to Joey Rocks. I don't know if you're listening, but and Black Veil Brides is another really good band that I'm really digging what they do. And I know Jarrett's a big Asking Alexandria fan, and so I mean there are a lot of good players out there like that, but this is one of those things you and I could spend 5 hours talking about, like, all this kind of stuff. But I love it because we're such big fans of this music as well. And I think that's what kind of drives us.
That's good. Well, I think, I forgot what I was going to say. Yes, you're right. There's so many different things we could talk about. And I've probably spent way more time than I thought I was going to spend. But I think you have probably definitely enough content that we've talked about to entertain somebody out there, right? And I would say, that there's probably plenty you can edit out.
No, I mean, this is all good stuff for sure, but I think we'll probably wrap it up here for now.
Yeah, don't feel like you got. I mean, man, I think even I don't know. I mean, I guess it's hard to edit stuff. I mean, go through it all, especially what's your typical times on your podcast?
I mean, anywhere from between like an hour to, hour and 30. I think when I had Marfit on the first time, like he went like 2 hours and it was just crazy. But I mean, I think we could probably wrap it up here for now. I definitely want to have you back on in the future just to talk some more stuff because it's always something going on with us band.
And I would say like this is, even if whatever, I've done enough of these things to know that if you have to do things over, I think that maybe we could sit down and go over just a rough agenda too. I think that, having something where we say, hey, we're going to talk about these few things. And I think it's fine. We ended up talking. We had definitely enough content, but maybe a little more structure where we say, hey, let's discuss this topic. And then you can have and say, hey, Greg, I want to, that way I stay on your agenda too.
But I mean, I think this was good in terms of just kind of introducing yourself to the people out there and just kind of letting them know who you are and what you're all about. And I think we did that. I think we did a pretty good job of that.
Yeah. But I appreciate you. Definitely appreciate you having me on and all that good stuff.
Anytime, man. It's been awesome having you on the show. There's so much we could talk about. We've only started scratching the surface, but I thought this is a great way to sort of introduce introduce you to people who didn't know, too much about you, especially, people who are fans of the band who might want to learn more about you. Now, where can they go online to find you on social media and because I know you said you have some instructional stuff on YouTube and on Facebook. Where can they find more from you online?
Well, I think that the newest things, as far as if you just want to, probably the best way of interaction anymore currently is on Facebook for me. It's facebook.com/Greg Summers Guitarist. It's kind of long, but you can also search Greg Summers. You'll find it. I'll say musician/band. And in iTunes, you can search Greg Summers as well. You'll find the instructional page, which has been quite a while, and you'll see the aviation stuff as well. And like I said, they're what is it going on? They're 8 years old now, but there may be some nuggets in there that you find interesting. So
definitely. Plus, you're also posting a lot of stuff to Vertebreaker's YouTube page, and not to mention running vertebreaker.net, basically, basically designing the website and all that, and doing such a great job with that.
Rod and I both do that together. Rod actually probably more so now than anything. I mean, he's kind of managing it, but yeah, we really wanted to kind of change that up a little bit, get on a platform that was a little easier to manage. And
for sure, man. Rod is such a visual guy in terms of designing stuff through Photoshop and all that. He's great when it comes to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, one last question I wanted to ask before we sign off. I know you're a licensed pilot. Any chance one day we might get a private jet and you fly it like Bruce Dickinson?
That would be awesome. Yeah.
I don't even know if you have that kind of license, but
yeah, no, actually those are what they call type ratings. So they can, right. You can, it's not necessarily there is some add-ons there, but yeah, right now, man, you just we'd have to have lots of money for insurance because you got to have quite a bit of hours to do that. But that would be awesome. So hats off to Bruce Dickinson for those guys if they can fly that much and get those type ratings like that and Lear jets and all the Gulf Streams. Good Lord, I'd love to have that. So.
Yeah, if only we had something like that. That would make touring a lot easier.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Dare to dream. Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on this, man. This has been so great.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much to Greg Summers, guitarist, teacher, pilot, webmaster, IT guy. He's a man who wears a lot of different hats, but I am very glad that he is in Vertebreaker. He just adds so much to the band. I think what makes our band as strong as it is all the different types of personalities in the band and the chemistry we all have with one another. And I hope that by listening that you got the chance to see sort of the dynamic even between Greg and myself. Yeah, I mean, there are a few differences of opinion on stuff sometimes, but I think that he and I definitely complement each other very well, and I think the same can be said for, Greg and the rest of the band. I think, having all those different elements and different personalities, I think makes us strong, or at least makes our chemistry with each other that much stronger. And the fact that we work as well together as we do, I think is a really, really good thing. And by the way, don't let his serious tone of voice fool you. Anytime that, whenever we're on the road, whenever we're together, he and Rod are always the two biggest goofballs, the two biggest knuckleheads that you're going to find. And those are the two oldest guys in the band. So I don't know what that says about us, but just Greg's a great guy. And I'm just glad that I was able to get him to sit down for this podcast. So I hope you guys all enjoyed that. Before we go, I definitely want to take some time to give a big thank you to everyone who made our recent trip up to Georgia possible. Thank you to James Cripps from Blind Anxiety Entertainment for booking us on those shows, and thank you to the other bands, Oblivious Signal, Days to Come, and Honestly, for just helping make that happen. We had a really fun time, and hopefully we'll get to do it again at some point in the future. As far as some upcoming events, you can see Greg and myself and the rest of Vertebreaker at Piper's Sports Bar and Grill on Sunday, July 24th. Piper's is in Green Acres, Florida, which is just outside of West Palm Beach. This will be our first ever appearance in the South Florida area, so we're really looking forward to that. We will be there along with our good friends 9 Mile Drive from Arcadia. So that should be a really fun time. Also appearing there will be a band called Framing the Red from Weeson, Mississippi. That show will be free. There's no cover charge. So definitely, if you're in the area on Sunday, July 24th, definitely come on out. We'd love to see you. After that, we will be back at the Shady Oaks Lounge in Palm Bay on Saturday, August 13th. We will be there helping out our friends in Days to Come from Albany, Georgia. We actually just went up to Albany, Georgia to play with them. Well, they're coming down, and they're having their CD release party in Palm Bay. So that should be a really exciting show over at the Shady Oaks. So far, there aren't any other bands announced yet, but I mean, I'm sure there'll be 2 other bands that will be announced very soon. That show is being brought to you by Chris Sherry. And that's it for this week. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at JackXConnor. Like me on Facebook at facebook.com/JackConnorMusic. Also, feel free to check out me, Greg, and the rest of the band at www.vertebreaker.net. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure you email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions for me and the band, email us at vertebreaker@yahoo.com. And you can always tweet me with the hashtag Phoenix Report. And if you're listening to this on YouTube or iTunes, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, go back and listen to all the other episodes. We have episodes with Ryan and Rod on here as well. I don't have one with Jarrett, but he's definitely next. He's coming up soon, so definitely stay tuned for that. Thank you, as always, for listening. This has been the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. We'll see you guys later. Bye.